Hey, what's up? I'm Dylan. I play drums in Shiloh. I'm going to talk to you about some records that I have, some of my favorites. This is Maybe I'll Catch Fire by Alkaline Trio. They've been one of my favorite bands forever. They were one of my first favorite bands. And so when I started picking up records when I was a teenager, they were one of the bands that I went out of my way to try to find. So I've got a handful of their records at home, but this is my favorite of theirs that I own. And so when I found it at the shop, it was something that I just had to pick up. I don't listen to it super often on vinyl, but it's one of my go-to records for fall. Like I'll listen to it a lot during the darker months. It's a great record. Another one that I have that I actually bought in Richmond. I don't live here, but I was here on tour a bunch of years ago, and I found this and picked it up. It's Leviathan by Mastodon. This is one of the most important records, not just on vinyl, but one of the most important albums in my music listening career. I started listening to them when I was like 12 or 13, right around the time I started playing drums, and Bron Daler was hugely influential in the way that I learned how to play. And this record in particular was one of the first albums that I forced myself to play through, and it was wildly above my skill level, but I spent like 6 months listening to this record pretty much every day and trying to play along to it until I could finally get through it. And there's still stuff in there that I can't play super well, and I've been playing for 15 years, but this record in particular is one of the ones that changed the way that I look at playing music and writing music. And it's, so when I saw it, it was something that I absolutely had to pick up. It's one of the most important records to me. And it's a cool thing to own. The artwork is incredible. It's just always been fascinating to me how they put together a product in such like a nice wrapped up little present. It's a great record. Another record that was super influential, not just musically, but in the way that it was packaged, is F sharp A sharp Infinity by Godspeed You Black Emperor. The music itself was life-changing when I discovered it. It actually took me a little while to get into it because it's super very experimental. But once I figured out what they were doing and allowed myself to be really into it, because I had friends in high school who were really into them and tried to get me on board, and it just wasn't for me at that time. But once I figured it out, it blew my mind. It's got the opening track to 28 Days Later on this record. Once I understood what they were doing compositionally, it was something that I wanted to try to not emulate, but take influence from in the way that I write music. And have used them as a huge influence in many other bands in the past. But they're one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite records to fall asleep to, even though it gives me weird as fuck dreams. But more importantly, just because we're talking about records, the packaging of this record always blew my mind. The fact that they have multiple covers, the photograph on the front is different on a bunch of different pressings, which is really neat. But all of the extra stuff that it comes from, they're an instrumental band primarily, but they have a bunch of poetry that they release with their records. And it also came with this insane print of a train. And more poetry. And a train squashed penny. And I always, and there's other bunch of other shit in here too, but I didn't realize that it came with any of this shit when I bought the record. I just loved the music, and when I opened it and actually took it apart, I like started to understand what they were doing as a band. Every time they put out an album, it was a full piece of art, and I've always tried to take that into account in the records that I've been a part of making. Every record is a performance, even if you're not playing live, and I think that's a really neat way to look at music as an art form, not just as music, but like as a full condensed piece. Last one I'm going to talk about is Synchronicity by The Police. Stuart Copeland has been probably my favorite drummer since I was, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Even before I was playing drums, I always knew that what he was doing was super special, and it made me want to do it. My dad had a Police greatest hits CD that was like in the constant rotation of everything that my parents listened to. It was played in the car, it was played at home on like, Saturday chores days. So I like grew up really only knowing the hits, but they were all songs that I thought kicked ass. This is the only Police record that I have. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite. It's got literally some of my favorite songs ever written on this record, but I secretly hate Side A with the exception of Synchronicity, which is the first track. I think like 3 or 4 of the songs on this record are actually like pretty bad. But the songs that are on here that I love are some of my favorite, not only favorite Police songs, but favorite songs ever written. Wrapped Around Your Finger, I think is like some next level top tier songwriting. I absolutely love that song, and it has one of my favorite moments in music, period. That snare hit before it picks up, oh, it's great. Yeah, it's a great record. Not my favorite record by any means, but one that I absolutely had to have in my collection because of what it did for the progression of my musical career. Listening to The Police at a very young age was hugely influential, and they're still one of my favorite bands now. I think Ghost in the Machine is like a perfect record. But yeah, I don't own that one, I own this one, so that's why we're talking about it. I'm Dylan from Shiloh. Thanks for listening. These are great records. Check them out if you haven't listened to them. Buy them if you don't own them already.